wisdom. So thank you everyone so much for coming. I'm so glad to see you all, and I'm really excited to share with you about my adventure this summer. It was an experience that I'm even still now kind of appreciating and wondering at, going through the photos that we took, and you know, this being 2023, we have a WhatsApp group. You know, WhatsApp is a chat and messaging app that lots of people use. You can make a great big group chat with tons of people, and you know, we formed it just as the group was finishing our adventure. And those first maybe 4 or 5 days after the trip, I was getting like 80 messages a day and contributing to discussions because people were just so excited. You know, one of the beautiful parts of the experience was getting to know some really amazing people, and comparing experiences and sharing stories from the classroom, and stories from our families and our lives. So all that being said, you know, it was really nice to go back and kind of relive some of the moments of the trip, and continue enjoying the afterglow of the experience. You know, just really quick before we start, I'll mention that the selection process was kind of an application. So as most of you know, I teach 4th grade in Rochester City School District at School 58, World of Inquiry, which is on Scioto Street and University. And being connected to the Rochester City School District Science Department, there's different places where opportunities for professional development will be posted. And I happened to see this one in early 2023, so maybe late January, just before I was about to have my rotator cuff surgery. So I decided to apply, and so I needed to get a recommendation from my administrator at school and write a personal essay and do all this rigmarole. Actually, the morning of my surgery, I was completing my application and sending it in. So, but it was nice to have something else to think about besides the dread and terror of going under the knife. So that was good. And I found out that I was selected in April, and then there was a series of kind of trainings and Zoom meetings in the run up, so that we could kind of find out more about our future shipmates and what the experience was going to be like. So and then in early July, we got together at the Port of Rochester. I think we left on July 5th, if I'm not, or maybe 6th, right after the 4th of July. So, okay, well, if I guess without further ado, we'll begin. I'm calling my presentation "Exploring Lake Ontario as a Teacher and a Learner." And you know, I know there's other educators in the room, and I think we could probably all attest that you know, being a teacher means being a learner. We learn from doing the act of teaching, but we also learn from our students. We learn from fellow educators. And so, you know, I think once you have that chip in your brain, it's hard to kind of turn it off. So I was both a teacher this summer and a learner. Oh, hello. Okay. Yes, please. Okay. Stand by. Let's see. If you click on the icon for Chrome, Carolyn, does it, the one on the right that has my little, okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So before we got on the boat, we took a little quiz. How well do you know, or do we know, Lake Ontario? So teachers like to give quizzes. So I'm going to give you all a quiz this morning. In just a second, we will have a series of questions, and if you feel like participating, you can just put a little 1 up if you think that the first choice is the correct answer, a 2 if you think it's the second, and so on. There should be 4. And Carolyn, if you wouldn't mind clicking on "How well do we know Lake Ontario?" it should bring up a link. Okay, so at the top it says Lake Ontario is the easternmost Great Lake, surrounded by New York and Ontario province. Water flows into Lake Ontario from the Niagara River and out Lake Ontario through the St. Lawrence River on its way to the Atlantic Ocean. What is the average depth of Lake Ontario? Do you think it's A, 50 feet, or number one, two, 283 feet, three, 802 feet, or four, 1,267 feet? The depth, how deep it is. Oh, there's a wide variety of choices. Okay. All right. Keep that choice in mind and we'll move on to the next question. I'll reveal the answers at the end. Next, how many people live in the Lake Ontario Basin? The basin is the geographical area where, a drop of rain, if it falls, will flow into Lake Ontario. Is it 13.5 million people in that area? Is it 5.7 million people? Is it 7.8 million people? Or is it 26 million people? A wide variety of ideas. Okay. All right. Moving on. Which fish was historically native to Lake Ontario? Chinook salmon, Atlantic salmon, brown trout, or steelhead? There's probably people in this room or out on Zoom who know what those fish look like, but I couldn't probably tell them apart. Maybe brown trout. I don't know. Okay. Last question, much to your relief. How long does it take for a drop of water to move through Lake Ontario? Is it 207 years, 3 months, 6 years, or 24 years? Okay. All right. Let's see, Carolyn, if you could try toggling back to the slides. Will it let you? If you can, I think, okay, we're going to get a little technical. If you drag down the menu bar at the top, Carolyn. Yeah. And then, okay, and now you can click back to the slides. Yeah, you can close that tab. We don't need it anymore. Yeah. Cool. All right. And then we can just, yeah. Okay. Oops. Yeah. Okay. And then we can go to the answers, slide 3. Oh, you can hit the slideshow if you want to. That will. Yeah, there you go. It's right next to the teal button that says drive. Right next to it, left. Slideshow, yeah. Yeah, and you can just click the slideshow. Great job, Carolyn. Thank you so much. I know. Thank you, Raina, for the assist. A goal and an assist. Okay. And we'll just, good morning, Dale. Good morning, Cindy. All right. Okay, cool. Oh, maybe it's working now, or was that you? Okay, cool. All right, so the depth, 203 feet is the average depth throughout the lake. The deepest part is 802 feet, which is very deep, if you ask me. Not the deepest, but pretty deep. Population. So if you count the Canadian side and the US side, 8.5 million people live in that area, which is, I think, a lot of people. Native fish, the Atlantic salmon is actually native to Lake Ontario, and that's due, scientists think, to the connection to the Atlantic from the St. Lawrence River. The other lakes, obviously, because of we'll talk about this, the Niagara Escarpment, right? And where we can see kind of in Niagara Falls, the fish couldn't get that high up. So, but when Europeans first came to the Great Lakes, they were catching Atlantic salmon. Finally, replacement time. That means a drop of water that ends up in Lake Ontario will be there for about 6 years before it flows into the ocean. Or another way to think of it is that all the water in Lake Ontario every 6 years is completely replaced by new water. Which is pretty cool, if you ask me. So great job. Whether or not you got all the questions right, maybe you learned some Great Lakes trivia. All right. So really quick, talking about the Great Lakes, because part of my participation in this boat adventure was to educate folks about the Great Lakes as an ecosystem and as an economic system, is to learn a little bit more about the Great Lakes. And I find all this stuff really interesting. I saw this morning. I thought it was really cute. This is an acronym to remember the 5 Great Lakes. Superman helps everyone. So the S is Superior, M, Michigan, H, Huron, E, Erie, and O, Ontario. So I don't know. Maybe we'll help you at trivia at the bar. I don't know. So the Great Lakes were formed by the melting of the glacier sheet that was covering this part of North America about 20,000 years ago. 90% of the fresh water in the United States is found in the Great Lakes. 20% of the world's fresh water is found in the Great Lakes. 40 million people in the US and Canada count on the Great Lakes for their water, their drinking water and their, bathing water, I suppose. And the Great Lakes function as one connected, I've heard it called a river system that flows into the Atlantic Ocean through the St. Lawrence River, which I think is pretty cool too. And next, oops, I wonder what's going on. If you could advance to the next slide, Carolyn. I did it. Oh, I didn't do it. Let's see. Try clicking on the presentation one more time. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. I really love this graphic because it's so hard for us to imagine, looking at like a 2D map or even, being out in the world about the sort of topography of the region. But the looking at it from kind of west to east, and how there is this gradual decline from Lake Superior, moving eastward all the way, and then you can sort of see where tiny little Lake Erie is up there, super shallow. It's why they're having all the problems with the algae blooms over there. But the Niagara Escarpment, which is this sort of, you can think about it as a plateau that begins close to Buffalo, obviously, and then extends all the way out, I think, to Wisconsin. But this natural geographic formation that forms the sort of the topography of the four lakes that are higher up, and then, of course, the big drop that we can see partly in Niagara Falls, moving into Ontario, and then all the way to the St. Lawrence and the ocean. So I thought this was kind of cool. Okay. All right. So moving kind of into my adventure here, the boat trip itself is known as the Shipboard Science Workshop, and sometimes they call it informally the Teacher Cruise, which I think is kind of cool. I've never been on a cruise before, so I felt very special. You can only imagine. And what better way to cruise than with other teachers, right? The goal of this is to foster what they call Great Lakes literacy, right? In other words, teaching folks about the natural part of the Great Lakes, the economic part of the Great Lakes, the recreational part of the Great Lakes, so that we can preserve and conserve this natural resource for generations to come. This is a yearly opportunity for summer professional learning for educators, not just classroom teachers. One of my colleagues works for the Natural History Museum in Chicago, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Other folks worked for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. So lots of different kinds of educators in different settings, but all with the goal of helping teachers learn about the Great Lakes so they can teach it to other folks like you all. The emphasis is on hands-on science, teaching, and learning. So one of the really amazing things was to be able to work alongside research scientists from Cornell, from SUNY, I always forget the acronym, the School of Science and Forestry. What am I? You're at ESF, and other schools, I think Nazareth. So the scientists were there on the boat with us, and we were helping them with their work. So that was pretty remarkable. This is a kind of a picture of the agenda for our trip. Okay, so this beautiful boat is called the Lake Guardian. It is an EPA research vessel, so that's the RV up there, and this is a boat that during the months where I should say spring, summer, and fall, the boat is out on the Great Lakes. It is doing science work, sampling water, some of the organisms that live in and around the water, and it goes all over. You'll sometimes see it in the port of Rochester, which is where our boat trip began and ended, but it goes along all the Great Lakes. I believe its home port is Milwaukee, I think. The EPA has been surveying in the Great Lakes since 1983. So that's 40 years of data, which is really important. The surveys collect data about water quality, about plankton, which just means floating organisms, and the benthos, which is like the deep or the bottom layer. And those surveys are happen primarily in March and August. So they do like what they call a spring survey in March, and then August is a summer survey. And then the teacher cruise happens in July. Let's see, Carolyn, could you click on where it says RV Lake Guardian? And then if you could scroll to the top of this, there we go. Okay, so there's the boat. And if you could scroll down just a little bit. Yeah, so, oh, sorry, just up just a tiny bit. So another research purpose is to monitor oxygen, what they call dissolved oxygen on Lake Erie, because so many of you are familiar with the problems that they've had on Lake Erie with these toxic algae blooms. And that is closely related to the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. And so they're keeping an eye on that. And I don't know how often. I imagine that sampling happens numerous times a year. That's something that I wanted to kind of mention because that's an important element of the boat's mission. And then just if you could scroll down just a bit more to where it says ship specifications, because I think it's, oh, sorry, a little too far. Yeah, it was the next section. Okay. Yeah, so the boat is 180 feet long. It's really big. Well, it's a little hard to describe, but many of you know the port of Rochester, and they're on kind of the water side where the river is emptying into Lake Ontario. But that's kind of where the boat is parked, and it takes up about half of that. I don't know what it's called. I'm sure the boaters here could help me with the word, but the berth. Yep. It has a berthing capacity of 41 people, including 14 crew members and 27 visiting scientists. On my trip, there was 15 teachers, and then maybe another 5 or 6 folks who were associated with either the EPA or with I'll talk about the organizations that supported the trip as well. Okay, I think that's probably enough about the boat for now. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think we might just want to close this tab. So if you want to move the menu out of the way again. Sorry, Carolyn. Yeah. And then, yeah, you can just X that little guy out. Perfect. And then, cool, we're back. All right, great. And let's see. Nope. I might need your help again to advance here, Carolyn. Yeah, it might be. Did it work? Okay. If you click on it, does it work? I think so. Yes, that's the next one. And it didn't look like this on my home computer screen, but it's almost illegible up there. So I'll just tell you about Sea Grant. Sea Grant is a network of different organizations that support research and education about any part of the U.S. that has basically Great Lakes coastline or ocean coastline. And so each state that has one of those two things has a Sea Grant, and the Sea Grant organization is responsible for kind of promoting, like I say, education and research. So New York Sea Grant was the coordinator for this trip because it was taking place in Lake Ontario. The other organization that helped out is the Center for Great Lakes Literacy, which, as it says up here, is associated with Sea Grant and fosters informed and responsible decisions to advance stewardship by providing hands-on experiences, which our trip was. So I'm very grateful to these two organizations for giving me this opportunity. And Sea Grant is also associated with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and universities as well. Okay, so I wrote 16, I think it was 15 educators from around the Great Lakes states, including New York, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. There was also staff from the EPA, who are, the EPA is responsible for running the boat, the Environmental Protection Agency of the US government. And then the boat also has a crew. So there's a captain and there's mates and there's a cook. We were all assigned sort of staterooms. It sounds fancier than it was. I'll show you a picture in a second. But my bunk was above the cook's. So I was worried about, like, am I going to snore? And, you know, this is an important guy. But we almost never overlapped. He had to get up very early in the morning to get breakfast on, you know, into the galley. And I didn't. So that was, I guess, convenient. There's also 4 research scientists, as I mentioned, from different universities who are studying algae, plankton, and what they call macroinvertebrates. More about that later. And the last one was the benthic community, so the organisms that live on the bottom of the lake. Okay, so where? This is this photo, somebody took it. It was a monitor that was on the boat, and it showed the path of the boat, the speed of the boat, other boats in the area, and the stops that we were going to make. So that kind of orangey red line shows our path. I believe Rochester's kind of over here, where there's this little dip in here, I believe. And then, so we went west, we came over, we stopped near Niagara Falls, Youngstown, New York. And then we went north, we passed by Toronto. We didn't stop there, but, and then we headed east. And then we kind of took a little dip down, went to the eastern part of the lake. We made another stop in Oswego, and then kind of passed by Sodus Bay and then back to Rochester. So that was the trip, and it was about seven-ish days. And here's another map of that same idea. Where you see where it says Lola, those are part of those that longitudinal data. So in other words, they've been collecting data for a long time at the same spots on the boat. And so we knew they had planned out, okay, we're going to do our samples here, 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 here. And the boat crew was great about kind of matching the speed so that we arrived at the right time. So everybody knew, okay, now we're ready to stop at Lola 19. And so at 7 o'clock or whatever, or sometimes it was late 11 p.m., we had to get our hard hats on and our life jackets and our huge boots. And be ready to go on station, which means to go out on the deck of the boat and get ready to do science work. And this is just a map to show all the different stations that have been part of these surveys. Of course, Ontario is all the way on the eastern part, and then, but as you can see, there it's all over the Great Lakes. Won't spend too much time on this. Okay, so I'm calling this a day in the life. I'll share my presentation on eConnect if anyone is interested, and I'll also share. I believe I can share the next thing, which is called a story map. But there's some really great photos, and I think you'll agree that the formatting is really nice too. So it kind of gives you an impression of what's going on. And all of us took a turn to make a little post. It's almost like a blog, but it's linked to a map. So Carolyn, if you could click a day in the life. Okay. Oh, there we are. I'm on the right, in case anyone's wondering. I'm like the second to last guy on the right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. You can scroll down. So there's the boat. Okay. And this is a good place to pause. So if you are able to access this at home, then, and I think you should be, because this is like part of the promotion of the program. Each one of these little numbers represents a post that someone wrote to describe our trip. So let's see. I think, Carolyn, if you wouldn't mind scrolling to the last one all the way down, there is a sample day that we had, just so you can kind of have an idea of it. It says, I believe it says a day in the life. Apologies for the scrolling. Yeah, perfect. Just a little bit up. Okay. What is the day like? Okay. So 7:30 a.m. breakfast. The galley was really small, and so they gave us like a 20-minute window, and they said, okay, this is your time to eat. Because when the crew comes in, and they might only have a short time, so get in, eat, and get out. And at first, people were really good about that, but then as the trip went on, we wanted to chat with each other and hang out a little bit more. 8:47, we left Youngstown, New York, which is close to Fort Niagara, and we headed northeast. And sometimes it was just a little bit of transit time. So we know it's going to be 2 hours until the next station. So we had time to work on some of the projects that we were responsible for completing, or group work that we were doing. Sometimes we just hung out on the deck of the boat and watched the world go by, which was also really nice. 9:07. First sampling station of the day. So in a second, we'll talk about the Rosette device, the phytoplankton net, and the Secchi disc. So different sampling techniques that scientists have been using for a while to study water. 10:30, lab work. So when teachers weren't on the deck sampling, they would spend time processing the samples they collected and analyzing data. The boat is kind of amazing because it's got three different lab spaces on board. So there was in one lab space, there was algae was being studied on one side. On the other side was the plankton and the macroinvertebrates. And then across the way, there was some microscopes set up. We didn't use the wet lab, but there's also a wet lab where I guess it's bigger samples of water can be processed. Lunch at 11:30. And then in the afternoon, another sample. So on and so forth. Another sampling, dinner. Yeah, we did eat dinner. One of the things that was a little bit of a challenge, especially, I don't know why it worked out this way, just the luck of the draw, was the first day, there was a late night sample. I want to say it was like maybe I had to be on deck at 11:30. So after all the excitement of like getting to the boat and finding all this stuff out and doing our evacuation drills and all that. I'll show you the Gumby suits in a second. It's pretty funny. We had these late night samples. So I was glad that I had the experience of being a dad and to know what it's like to function without sleep, right? That was valuable to me. But it was a real feeling. I found myself getting a little cranky on board. So okay. But it was also fun because we got to be on deck with people and share that experience of doing something hard together. So that was fun. Okay. So I guess, Carolyn, we can probably look at these pictures for a second. Oh, I think, no, that's not me. No, that's not me. But you can see the different sampling things that are happening there and lab work. Cool. All right. So once again, Carolyn, you can go ahead and close this up. Like I say, if people are interested, I can post this on eConnect and you can kind of scroll through the pictures. There's a lot on there. So let's see if you, yeah, there you go. Try clicking again at the bottom on the Chrome. Yeah. And then, yeah, there we go. Cool. And then we'll go to the next. Okay, so here, these are, and I forget the formal name for them, but we call them the Gumby suits. I think the crew calls them that too, for obvious reasons. But they are designed to keep you both afloat and warm, and if the boat ever needs to be evacuated, I guess they're just cold water survival suits is probably what they're called. They're really hard to get into because once you get your hands in there, it's hard to zip it because it's almost like a mitten, so you have to, there's like a great big toggle that you have to grab and pull up. And the day that we got on the boat, it was probably like at least 85 degrees. And it was air conditioned on the boat, but once we got in the suits and the effort of getting in, almost immediately you're like wiping the sweat away. So, but luckily we didn't have to stay in them too long, but they obviously needed to show us how to stay safe if there's ever, an emergency that we would have to abandon ship. They taught us how to deploy the lifeboats if it's ever necessary. So don't ask me if I could do it. If I had to. I mean, if I had to, I guess I would, but I don't remember too much about it. This is what one of the staterooms looked like. It's hard to give you an idea of the scale, but not very big, as you can imagine. There's a fold down bunk at the top. So in theory, 3 people can fit in each stateroom. It's pretty small quarters. It was almost like also adjoining hotel rooms where there's a bathroom in the middle. They call it the head on the boat. It's the head. Yep. I was interested in this, obviously on a boat, you have to conserve resources because it's all got to be contained there. And they told us that the reason they want us to take short showers is not so much because there was problems with the supply of shower water, but with the disposing of the gray water, the wastewater, because if that hold or tank fills up, it creates problems down the line. So they said, please take short showers, conserve water. And then this is, you can't see my boots, but here I am in my favorite blue hard hat, getting ready to go out on station, got my life jacket on, complete with a light and a whistle that I didn't need, thank God. And I'm wearing steel-toed boots that came up about this high as well. And there's Toronto from the water, which is pretty cool, if you ask me. So we got to see some cool sights, especially at night being on station. Okay, let's see if I can advance this or if I'll need oh, there we go. Okay, so here's sampling, right? So collecting different kinds of samples. This is a net that's used to collect plankton. This is to study the benthic, the bottom community, right? So looking at the organisms on the bottom and what the sediment is like on the bottom. This guy is part of the crew. He was a marine technician. He's holding this new research technique that they were piloting on our trip, which is a video camera that's deployed on this sort of frame, and they wanted to see, well, could this be a technique that would help researchers? So they deployed it to the bottom, and then they tried to see if they could analyze the images later to kind of do a count of the mussels on the bottom, for example. So one of our teacher teams worked on that project as well. Down here, this is pretty cool. I think you can kind of see some red glowing display on one of the winches that was there. And that was showing the depth in meters. And so, if we're in a deep spot, I don't know, maybe it's, I'll just say maybe the bottom's 200 meters and, it's 11:30 at night and you're just watching the numbers go down, 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 down. And then it comes up and then it goes down again. So there was just, it was cool, but there was a lot of that, it's like any job, right? You're just, yeah. But it's really interesting to see the technology that they have on the boat, which is really amazing. And then over here, this guy was a very cool guy. His name is Caden Nasworthy, and he, I believe he teaches down at Cornell, and he studies these little critters. They're macroinvertebrates, so like little crustaceans called mysis. The English name is possum shrimp. They're really cute. They gave us as a little parting gift a little preserved vial over there next to the orange magnifying glass, and I encourage anyone who is interested to go and check them out. But they're a really important part of the food chain in the Great Lakes and on Lake Ontario. And so Caden studies them, and he was also not pioneering, but he was testing out some new technology to study them and learn more about them. One interesting thing about those guys is that they're very sensitive to light. During the day, they migrate to the bottom or to lower light levels because they don't like white light. And then at night, they come up to the surface to feed because the organisms and the algae that they eat is closer to the surface. So if the ship lights at night would scare them, and they would migrate down. So they use red lights on the deck of the boat so that everybody can see what they're doing, but so they wouldn't scare the possum shrimp away. Okay, so this is cool. This was like a big part of the work that I helped with on the boat. This device is called the Rosette. There's another fancy word for it, but we called it the Rosette. And it's a series of 12 great big tanks of water. I want to say each one could hold 8 liters, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken, but a lot of water. And it's deployed by this winch. It goes down into the water, and then it's hooked up to a computer that tells it when each bottle when to open, and so you can study water at different depths using this device. So they would send it down to 20 meters and 15 meters and 5 meters, whatever it is, whatever they were interested in studying. It also was hooked up to a whole suite of sensors that would give information about the temperature of the water, the turbidity or other like the sort of clarity of the water, and dissolved oxygen and chlorophyll. So there is a lot going on. This is a pretty useful scientific instrument. So we helped to get it ready to go down, and then when it came back up, we would you can kind of see us over here. I think this is me here with the blue hat on. We took samples from each one of the bottles, and we filled a couple of these little brown plastic bottles, labeled them or matched them to the right labels, and then we would bring them into the labs for processing. So the depth profile is the information that the sensors would give. And this was almost like the water cooler when the Rosette was going down. Everyone would gather around this monitor, and we would study this because it tells us a lot of information about what's going on in the water, and it's a lot of scientific interest. The green line shows the chlorophyll levels. The red is the temperature. The blue is the dissolved oxygen. And then finally, the yellow is a measure of the turbidity of the water, or how clear it is, basically. There's something interesting happening where you can kind of see the red line kind of tank down. It goes down in a hurry. Depth is on the right, increasing depth going down, and then increasing values going to the right. So you can tell how it's like close to the surface, it's pretty warm, but then it levels off, and then it drops in a hurry. And that's an important line. Scientists call it the thermocline, which is basically another way of saying, below that, it gets really cold. So algae like to have enough light. They don't like it to be, in general, they don't like it to be too warm. And so in a lot of stations, you would find out that there's something called the DCL, or the deep chlorophyll level, which just basically means the sweet spot for algae, where they're not getting too much light because they don't want to get a sunburn, but they're getting the right amount of light, and they're in a comfortable temperature. So that you would often see like the green chlorophyll line kind of spikes out at that spot. And scientists are interested in that because it kind of tells us like, this is where we want to study the algae that are here. So oftentimes at that depth, wherever it is, in this case, like we would probably say it's around 20 meters, maybe, there would be a Rosette bottle at that depth. Below that, there's not much sense in studying algae because there's not going to be a whole lot going on. Sometimes at the bottom, they would also do a bottle from the rosette, but not always. Okay, we would get into the lab. So we would take samples, and there's microscopes in there. This is me over here filtering water in I was a filter servant. On like the second day of the trip, I said, how can I help? And Greg Boyer, who teaches, I believe at ESF, SUNY ESF, said, would you like to be a filter servant? And I said, I don't know what that means. And he said, well, come, I'll show you. And then I became a filter servant. So I spent hours and hours and hours doing just what you see me doing here, measuring water, pouring it into these different machines, running it through these filters, packaging the filters, labeling the filters, for all the different ways that these things need to be studied and will be processed in labs. There's studying chlorophyll and the types of chlorophyll, because that's indicative of the types of algae that are present or not present. This is my one of my lab partners, whose name was Barb Bibbins, and she teaches in Adams, New York, which is sort of close to heading up into into Thousand Islands territory. So it's that part of New York. Let's see, I don't know if this will work, but let's try pressing play. We can see Barb in action. Water through the filter. Thousands of times. Yeah, so it's not that exciting, but it was fun. What I really enjoyed about that was that it gave me something that I knew I could do competently. There's a lot going on in the boat that I was like, I don't know. I don't know anything about any of this stuff. I tried to measure these little zebra and quagga mussels, but it didn't go well. The calipers were hard to use for me, but this was something that I felt like I found my niche, and I got to do it a lot. I got to do it a lot. So that was kind of fun. But as you can see, it's a science lab, and that was a cool experience for me, just being able to be part of real science happening, to learn about how scientists do their work, and to kind of think about like, how could I invite my students to take part in something along this that will help them understand this experience. Thank you. And then I think if you hover over here, does it give you a little? Yeah. And you might have to click it twice, this little guy here. It's going to probably, yeah, try it 2 times. Oh, sorry. Perfect. You found it. Okay. All right. So I don't think I'll go, unless there's questions, I won't go too much into what the 3 research projects kind of panned out as. A lot of the important research will happen later on as scientists sift through the data. We were just really looking at a limited set, but they were inviting us as teachers to kind of think about how scientific research works, and can we make any conclusions about this really limited set of data that we have. So I was part of the algae group. There was a group that's studying these 2 really important kinds of mussels, and I'm sure you've heard of the zebra mussels. There's actually zebra mussels, I learned, have been displaced almost entirely by these quagga mussels, who are a different kind of invasive mussel that originally came from the Atlantic Ocean and hitchhiked their way here and are out competing the zebra mussels. So they are now the big problem. One of the big problems that we have ecologically in the Great Lakes and in Lake Ontario. They look really similar. They're really hard to tell apart. You can't even tell by the color, it turns out. And we're talking about mussels that are about this tiny. You have to turn them sideways. And I believe, I'm trying to remember, if it kind of looks like a triangle, sort of, then it's more likely to be a zebra mussel, if I have that correct, maybe. But one of them looks more like a triangle, and the other apparently kind of flops over. But scientists know how to tell them apart, which is important. but the bottom is covered in these things, and it's caused, as you probably are aware, massive problems with the entire food chain, because these guys are so good at filtering out the algae, and they really have found a habitat that they enjoy. They have almost no predators, and they're kind of continuing to wreak havoc, unfortunately. And then there's the plankton group. Those are the possum shrimp, and I think that's the same little jar that is over there, or one like it. So if, again, if anyone wants to check them out, that would be cool. They were not just studying the possum shrimp, but other true plankton. So possum shrimp are technically crustaceans; they're not plankton, but they that was part of the study. So they were looking at the different kinds of little critters that we can't see without microscopes, and checking on the health of their various populations, and wondering about the micro food chain as well, which of course is important for the entire food chain. Okay, so next steps for me. One of the requirements for participation is that I design and teach a series of lessons to my class. I couldn't help putting up this picture of my students. There was some COVID, I call it slush fund money. They said, here's a little bit of money. Would you like to spend it on your students? And I said, yes, I would. So we bought lab coats for them, and I think they look so stinking cute with their lab coats on. So that's my class this year. And so I'm developing some lessons based on what we learned on the boat in order to share that with them, and with other classes in the building. It was kind of cool to be selected as an elementary teacher, because there was really only one other elementary teacher in our group of 15. And I think maybe I was one of the only urban teachers selected. So I really am I'm so glad that I get to share this with a group of students who can really benefit from it. One of my passions is to help my students catch a glimpse or open a window onto a world that they might not otherwise know. And so I'm really excited to have them doing some science about Lake Ontario in whatever form that works out to be. And then, of course, just like we are talking about today, a next step is to support conservation of Lake Ontario and help protect the Great Lakes in general, because they're a really amazing natural resource that we have right here in I'll say our front yard, right to the north. And so I don't want anyone in this room or out on Zoom, to take Lake Ontario for granted. So that kind of concludes my remarks, my presentation, but I would love to take any questions that folks might have. Let me just make sure that I'm really done talking. Yes, I am. Okay, Sam.
Like Tom, or was it windy and choppy and
what
was that?
You want to just repeat your question to the mic, Sam?
Oh, just a question about the weather that you experienced. I'm curious about how choppy the water was and how much wind and so on. Did people get seasick?
I'm exceedingly grateful, Sam, to say that it was mostly calm seas. I was taking Dramamine just preventatively. Something interesting happened, though, which I discovered. We made a stop near Niagara Falls, and we went to the aquarium there to kind of learn about their Great Lakes conservation work. And we were getting lunch, and I felt myself doing this. And I said, what's happening to me? And actually, Caden Nasworthy said, land sickness is a real thing. So yeah, it happened. Your body kind of gets used to the motion of the water, even if it's not great. And then when you are on dry land, you still have your sea legs, I guess. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah.
Two questions. One is, you said they started collecting data in 83, but the Clean Water Act predated that, right? So why did they wait until 83 to start collecting their data? And then the other question is, are Lake Ontario fish safe to eat?
So I have to admit that I don't know in either case. I don't know if it was a case of like the sampling, the annual survey started with a certain research program, or when the boat was acquired, because apparently the boat used to be a a boat that would service oil platforms, offshore oil platforms. Apparently, that's what the lore is about the boat. And then it was converted into a science research vessel. So, so I don't know about that, but I would like to know as well. I don't know about safe to eat. I myself would not just because I don't eat. You know, I'm a plant-based eater, so I'm a vegan. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Right, for sport fishing. Could be. Yeah, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, question about the mussels. I was just wondering if they eat the algae, do they ever take care of any of that blue-green algae that we don't want? Do you know they?
So my understanding is they eat all the algae. They're really amazing filter feeders. And you know, the problems that have happened partly in well, across the Great Lakes is really because they're eating more than their fair share, and so it's causing die-offs of all kinds of organisms, which creates like an environment where there's not enough oxygen, and so pretty big problems.
Yeah, my question is related to Pat's. I'm quite ignorant about Lake Ontario, but my understanding was that it was extremely polluted at one time. And I'm wondering, first of all, how it is now compared to that time. And that was back, I think, more in the 70s. But could you just comment on the pollution?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, I'll be quick to mention that I'm certainly not an expert on any of these things. I'm just a classroom teacher who went on an adventure, but I can say that, you know, I think somebody mentioned, Pat, maybe the Clean Water Act, and that's been really successful in helping on Lake Ontario become healthier in terms of especially industrial pollution. An ongoing problem, and lots of us are aware of this as well, is agricultural pollution, which usually comes in the form of fertilizer that it runs off into rivers and then into the water, into Lake Ontario. And that's an ongoing problem. Also, you know, what we put on our lawns ends up ultimately in the lake. So if we're fertilizing or if we're putting chemicals onto our lawns or in our yards, ultimately it's one basin. So it will, you know, it'll end up there in some form or another. So I think that's kind of something for us all to consider. But I can't speak entirely to like pollution levels because I just don't know that much.
Excuse me, can I interrupt 1 second? The elevator is out. So, Ed can take people down the freight elevator if anyone needs him. So I'll ask him to come up and just be hanging out here. I don't know where the freight elevator is, but he told me that he can do that. So, so people would need to walk down the hall. Okay. All right. So just FYI.
Thanks, Lori.
I told Tucker earlier that one of my college roommates worked for the EPA in Chicago and spent her summer in 1986 on this same boat. And I'm going to see her next week because my college reunion is happening. And I'd love to tell her, you know, what's happened to the lake since 1986. She may well know, but do you have any information to give her?
I wish I did. I think I would probably learn a lot more from her than her from me, but but I think that is such a cool connection.
Any other questions? Oh.
What kind of food did you eat on the boat?
Well, it was really good, actually. It was very kind of the cook. They asked us about dietary restrictions, and I told them that I'm a plant-based eater, and so there was always something for me. But there was pasta, and there was a couple different times there was vegan chicken nuggets, which weren't too bad. There was always a salad bar that had all kinds of good stuff in it. So it was good food. It was good food. Pancakes for breakfast often. Yep, we ate well. Good. Well, too many people have told me, Otto, that, the second happiest day of a boat owner is the day you buy it. And the happiest day is the day you sell it. But it was an amazing privilege to be out on the water all those days. We saw some gorgeous sunrises and sunsets, and it was kind of a funny story. The crew are these like burly guys with big beards, like, you picture sailor, like, yeah, like they literally had like anchor tattoos and stuff. But this one guy who was he was either the first or the second mate, and I can't remember, but he told us, we see some really amazing sunrises and sunsets. It sounds kind of corny, but we painted a mural. I looked behind me, and they had painted the most gorgeous mural on the side of the boat, and it just made me reflect that it's almost impossible to miss how beautiful the lake is. I mean, it's really stunning. And the topography is amazing. Going by Chimney Bluffs State Park along the water was spectacular, and it's I felt really privileged and blessed to have been part of the experience. So
you may have answered the question I was trying to formulate. It sounds like a lot of the work that they do is tedious and kind of boring. And I'm wondering, I suppose if you're a dedicated scientist, you might put up with it, but I suppose that the sunrises and the sunsets might be a nice fringe benefit to keep people doing that kind of work.
Maybe so. I think that, I was really impressed by the scientists, not just their willingness to share their expertise with us and to invite us to be part of their work, but also by their dedication. They were all seasoned professionals and had been on numerous surveys before, and they leave their families, and they pack all their stuff into a duffel bag, and they kind of put up with the discomfort of living on a boat for however long, so that they can do their important research. So they're amazing people.
This will be our last question. Thank you, Becky. Tucker, thanks so much. But I just think this is an amazing experience that you've had. And I'm wondering, so what are you going to do with your classrooms? Are you going to take them to the lake?
Yeah, I would really like to. They have different programs across the Great Lakes where kids get out on the water, and they take part in these sampling activities. And so I kind of shared with some of the organizers from the Sea Grant. I said like, oh, I would really love to get kids out on the water. So it may take a year or two, but that's one of my dreams for sure. Yeah, well, lots of them go up to Charlotte, to the beach, but to be out on the water, I think that would be a really special learning experience. So yeah, I hope to do that for sure. Yeah.
Tucker, this was really, really interesting for me. I think I'm going to look at the lake differently, and I'm going to wonder. I'm going to have more questions about what's under there, and I bet your kids will do that too. So thank you so much for coming.